Dr. Susan Michael, USA Director of International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem, welcome to the broadcast and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Armstrong. It's great to be with you today.
It's our pleasure. But I want to start today. Oh, I love your outfit, Dr. Michael. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you.
And Dr. Ambassador of Peace, Anila Ali is in studio, American Muslim women's rights activist. Let me start with you. The Iranians have put a bounty out on your head. It's what they call a fatwa?
Fatwa, yes,
Yes.
That's right, Mr. Williams.
And in other words, they are putting you in the line of fire for assassination. That's not something that normally happens unless they consider you to be a threat. Why would the IRCG put a fatwa on your head?
It's because they know I'm being heard. They know that I have a moral compass, I'm speaking the truth, and they want to shut down anyone like me who comes up. It just happens that I'm a woman, I guess I'm a mother, and I'm blessed because I'm speaking the truth.
What is the truth that you're speaking?
The truth is that Hamas has hijacked my religion. You remember Al-Qaeda? They hijacked Islam more than 22 years ago. We said the same thing. As American Muslims, we have a responsibility to speak the truth and come out and stand with America and look at the values. There's no conflict in Islamic values and the Constitution of America. We are told to save lives in Islam, and Hamas takes lives. Look at the way they are building the empire of death. You know, they're the puppets, they're the proxies for the Iranian regime, and they are building their empire of death on the dead bodies of the Palestinian children. If they really, Mr. Williams, if they really cared about these Palestinian lives, don't you think that they would have released the hostages on October 8th when they knew that Israel in self-defense is going to attack them? I mean, you butcher 1,200 people, innocent civilians. They did not come for the IDF. And also, that you butcher them in such a way that you look like you're monstrous. This is not Islam. That you desecrate God's holy name. You know, Allahu Akbar, the holiest words in Islam. They use that to rape women. They use that to kill and butcher innocent people. And I want to say, it wasn't just Jewish people. It was Christians. It was Muslims. It was the Druze. And there were so many ethnicities. They didn't care. They just wanted to sabotage the peace that Arabs and Israelis were finally building, because they're the monsters that are using religion. And we all know Iranian regime wants hegemony of the world. They are radical Shia extremist mullahs who want to take over the world. And yes, they are the enemies of America. And I do believe that Israel is just on the way. And once, you know, their goal, God forbid, comes true, America is on their list. And if you think that they are not in America, we see that.
You know, I often say that if you haven't found something to die for, you haven't really lived. And so obviously you found something to die for. And I know you've shown great empathy and sympathy for the people of Gaza. But does that also justify the actions of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where he seems to say, I'm going to put it in this once and for all, because they're not going to ever change. They never apologize for the vicious, unprovoked attacks, and we just got to just scorch earth.
Mr. Williams, on October 7th, I woke up in the morning just like anybody else, and I saw what happened. I was in disbelief, I was in shock, and my immediate reaction was, you know, why are they doing it? Who is doing it? They're sabotaging the peace process, the Abraham Accords. And as I started talking to my friends and family, and they started echoing the beliefs of Hamas, that October 7th, that these attacks were perpetrated by Israelis to make Muslims look bad, to make Palestinians look bad. I could not believe. I knew that this is what I have to do. And if that means that I take on everybody, which is essentially what it was, and
including
speak
your
the
own
truth.
loved ones.
And my family. A lot of my family around the world, from the Middle East, Pakistan, Asia, to America, they started saying, no, you have to stand up for the Palestinians. I told them I'm standing up for the Palestinians by telling everyone what the nefarious goals of Hamas are. They don't care about the Palestinians. If they care about them, they must let the refugees, the hostages go. But they don't care about them. And that is why they found the most monstrous way to attack innocent civilians. Look at what they've been doing with the curriculum in Gaza and West Bank. I have been working on Middle East peace for the past 10 years, going to the region, speaking to the people who actually lost to Hamas, the Gazans who lost to Hamas, the presidential candidate, and he told us what their goal was. They don't care about Palestinians. They're there because they're an Iranian proxy. And you know, when they won, the PLO and the Fatah, the two parties in the West Bank, they were very angry with them. They were also very angry with the Gazans for voting for them. And you know why? Because PLO was Sunni and Hamas was supported by the Shia Iranian radical regime. And they were holding back on resources to punish them. That is the dynamics of what was happening. I wanted Palestinian brothers and sisters to understand that they will be more empowered if they start going against Hamas. And I know that it's very tough because they're bullies. They'll kill you. That's how they rule. But how come today we don't have people standing in the campuses of America saying Hamas kills its own people? It has imprisoned people. It has butchered its own people if they spoke out. People in Gaza are scared to come out because the moment they come out and they say they stole our food, they're selling the food and the aid coming in from the world, they are not letting our children live the same life as the Israeli children are living. What do you think will happen? I know that the mothers want. The mothers want their children to live, but they want them to think that death and martyrdom is the way to a Palestinian state. And we want to tell them, no, peace is. Islam also says, peace, make peace. And for God's sake, these are the children of Abraham. We are all descendants of Adam. I know the Bible says it, the Torah says it. The Quran is a continuation of the same message, and they have stolen that message and made us think that we don't have any shared humanity. And God knows that is not the truth.
Dr. Michael, how is it that these campus protests have become so effective? Why is it that death to America and death to Israel has become a rallying cry that such a young generation has embraced, spread throughout Europe, in the United States? And what is this bode, how does this bode for our future if these are our leaders?
Well, it's very concerning, and I think that it's reflective of decades of negligence on our part, because we have allowed foreign money to pour into our college campuses and take over whole departments, what is taught. They sponsor professors. They have been filling our Ivy League campuses, our state campuses, with a Marxist ideology that is anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-freedoms. And we're paying the price for that now. It's shocking to see how well organized they were. I think that's what really caught everyone's attention after October the 7th. We're still waking up to the news and making sense of what just happened. And they've already organized protests around the world within hours. How is that, except that they weren't organizing for this ahead of time, preparing for it, just waiting for the go-ahead? But it's a sad moment for America to realize that tomorrow's leaders have gone to colleges that have been teaching this type of anti-American ideology.
But you know, it was just announced this week by some of the protest leaders that the protest is not enough. Maybe it's time for violence. Maybe violence is the next part of these protests. I mean, to be so bold to say that and think that they can use our laws against us, where we protect the minority, the most violent, the most disrespectful, and we sit by and do nothing, is as if we encourage their behavior because we don't allow our rule of law to be in place to stop this kind of ramping up of this kind of rhetoric. So what role do countries like our government and Europe play in this for allowing this and not enforcing the law and not allowing law enforcement to do their jobs?
That's right. The question is, where is our government? Are they going to allow this? Are they going to allow students on our campuses to protest in favor of a terrorist organization? It's been declared Hamas is a terrorist organization. They're going to go out in the streets and call for armed resistance in support of this. That's against the law. But is our government going to do anything? That's the question. And we should not allow it. Absolutely should not allow it. But I'm afraid that it will be allowed to continue.
I'm Armstrong Williams, and we'll be back. Ambassador Ali, you were once an instructor, a teacher in the school system. You know, there's been so much about DEI and what that means. But as a former school teacher and as someone who's now an ambassador of peace and with great insights on Hamas and how you feel they have perverted Islam, what is the meaning of DEI to this protest and violence in Hamas culture?
You know, first of all, I want to say I'm horrified to see what's happening on our campuses. But as an educator, like you have mentioned, yes, for 20 years I taught in a public school system. I saw that people don't understand, educators don't understand what DEI is. And what they're doing is teaching one version of it, which is the oppressor and the oppressed, and anything else in between is not being taught. So our young people are going to grow up to think there's only a zero-sum game, that they cannot find solutions. And imagine in 10, 15 years, these are going to be the leaders who will not only think that violence is okay, that violence is resistance, that killing is an American value. They're going to not be able to make decisions on their own feet because they have not been taught. I also ask the educators, you know, what are you thinking when you're doing DEI? Is it because you want the world to be a better place? If that's the case, then you're going to teach them all perspectives. Then you're going to teach them to find better solutions, not stand in an American campus and, you know, oppress and suppress the rights of the Jewish students to go to class. And then imagine they're going to not also talk about religious freedom and the freedoms that we value that make America the country that I moved to. They are going to take away the freedoms of people they don't like. And right now it happens to be the Jewish people. They are being attacked on campus. Also, think about this, Mr. Williams. America's #1 goal is to promote religious freedom in the world. And I am that ambassador of religious freedom to countries like Pakistan. What is my standing when I go to the rest of the world and I say, you know, I'm here, we must give, religious freedom to minorities like the Christians in Pakistan and the Hindus in Pakistan and India? I won't be able to say that because we in America are not giving the same right to Jews. Why? Because their educational institutions teach them that there's only one point of view, and that's the oppressor and the oppressed. They also don't educate them. Israel is so multicultural that 20% of Israel is Muslims and Arabs, and that if they're asking for the annihilation of Israel, they're also saying it's okay to kill the 20% Arabs and Muslims and Christians there. How is that education?
Let me just stay with you a minute, Dr. Ali. How do you think that Hamas and these protesters have become so successful in co-opting the mainstream media and these think tanks to push their agenda, give sympathy for their agenda, and then oftentimes just decide certain stories they're just not going to tell?
Well, do you see me on mainstream media? No. The thing is, they have built their point of view on victimhood. They sell victimhood. And through this one perspective of oppressor and oppressed, they have built this sympathy in the media, and I would say the left media on the left, for the Palestinian cause, not realizing that you are disempowering a whole generation, a whole nation of the Palestinians by using them as your rallying cry, instead of saying, you know, let's have the Arabs and Israelis sit down and make peace because we want the Palestinians to stop dying. Nobody's talking about that on campuses because they've been brainwashed. I mean, that's exactly the bullying that Hamas does in Gaza and the West Bank. And, you know, I think about this and I think the curriculum has to change. But before we do the change of the curriculum on our educational campuses, which are complicit in teaching our children this violence and zero-sum game, we have to ask the very essential question: what do our educational leaders and what do the leaders of America want? Do they want people to cooperate in America? Do they want religions to live peacefully in America? And if that they say yes to, then they have to completely look at the curriculum and perhaps rewrite it. Look at Harvard. It's an absolute mess. It's a cesspool of hatred and anti-Semitism. And we all know, and I say that to my Muslim community, that if today Jews are being attacked, we're going to be attacked too. It's just a matter of time. So yes, I feel that they have to completely think and rewrite the curriculum and say DEI didn't do justice to the cause of understanding each other. You know, we're teaching our children that it's great to include people but not to understand them. Oh, if they're Muslims and maybe Christians, you can understand them, but if they're Jews, then yeah, you have to persecute them. That's essentially what our educational institutions are teaching. And we've got to change that very quickly, or horrifically, some of these young people are going to be in leadership. Imagine the world with them as leaders.
You know, it's interesting, Dr. Michael. We seem to push a narrative today that it is the people of Jewish faith in Israel that's threatened by this new normal in the world. And people also talk about the persecution of Christians around the world. But I think Dr. Ali said something very important early on, is that in Israel on October 7th, it wasn't just Jews and Christians that were killed, but Muslims and people of all faith. And so this is more about people of faith versus people who want to push their the ideology, their agenda, and their value system on not just America, Israel, but on the world. They want to reshape the dynamics of what it is to be faithful and what is right and wrong, and what is normal versus what has become, what as the Bible says, what is right will become wrong, and what is wrong is becoming right. Talk about that on a more global perspective, because it's about all of faith all across the board.
Well, it is, but I think that what Ambassador Anila just said, it is against Christians as much as against Jews. So I'm going to speak first about here in the United States, be a little bit easier to address that. We have a marriage between the progressive left and the Muslim cause, let's call it that. And it always, it would make you really scratch your head. Why is a largely secular, liberal movement so aligned with such a religious movement as the Muslim world? And what do they have in common? And my answer is that what they have in common would be an anti-Christian agenda. And so the far left progressives hate the Christian history of America and any Christian identity of America. And so if I stand up and say, I think America is a Christian country, then they try to call me a Christian nationalist and try to squelch that message as much as possible. So there is very much an anti-Christian element to this here in the United States. Now, what you just saw happen in Israel, the reason the Hamas fighters would kill anybody, it didn't matter if they were Jewish, Christian, Bedouin, Druze, if they were seen as aligned with Israel. So it wasn't about faith, it was about their alignment with Israel. So an Israeli Arab was taken hostage just like Israeli Jews were taken hostage because they were Israeli. Even foreign workers were taken hostage because they were seen as aligned with Israel. And so that's a lot of what's going on there. Now in Europe, we have just an amazing alignment here of the far left liberals, but also the far right radicals with the Islamic agenda, which we see with the DEI and the immigrants and the socialism there that's stronger in Europe than it is even here in the United States. And at the end of the day, it really is, with these ideologies, very anti-Christian, anti-Bible, just like you quoted, that we're entering the day where what is evil is called good and what is good is called evil. And Isaiah talks about that day. And that's what we see happening here. And that is a Judeo-Christian biblical foundation. So the hatred is against Jews and Christians and the Bible at the end of the day. We have a world that is built on moral relativism. They hate the thought that there is truth and falsehood. They hate the thought of the Ten Commandments or of the Bible, that there's something called truth, because they want it to all be relative. And whatever I decide today is the truth, that's the truth. That's moral relativism. So what you're talking about is a real, like what we call a perfect storm, the coming together of all these various ideologies and causes that you wonder, how can they even come together in agreement? But in each part of the world, they've got their focus, and it really blows my mind sometimes.
Here's what people are really thinking. I mean, you look at what has happened since October 7th. You look at how Israel was successful with the pagers, how Israel is now his ground troops in Lebanon. You would think, and then I've even read that the Hamas leaders, Hezbollah, miscalculated. They never knew that Israel would go to this extent after being so violently attacked on October 7th. But does that mean that at some point Hamas and Hezbollah and these other terrorist organizations are going to come to the table and say enough is enough, while there may never be peace, but we're not going to attack Israel, we're not going to try to do these dastardly acts anymore in the dark? Or do you imagine the world getting worse and could possibly escalate, Ms. Ali, to a World War III?
I certainly hope not. But to think that these people, these evil terrorists, are ever going to come and say, no, peace is the way, when they have built their entire ideology, and you can't even change that ideology because they believe in it so intensely, on death. They live to die. And you've got Israelis and Jewish people, they have an existential crisis. It's life fighting death. And you know, the martyrdom, I'll tell you, I was in Ramallah and Jenin in 2018, the West Bank. And, you know, I was trying to figure out what was happening and be an eyewitness, bear witness to truth. And I saw posters at that time of, you know, Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian Authority, they were all complicit. Posters asking Palestinians to give their children for $25,000 and $15,000. So imagine that our money that goes to the Palestinian children to educate them and to feed them has been going to build these martyrs. This ideology is very toxic. And Hamas and Hezbollah and Iranian regime, they're very calculating. Also, we have to know that this didn't happen overnight. I have been working on the ground on violent extremism since 9/11. You know, 9/11 happened because of the Jews. And I and my organization, we stood up and said, that's not true. And it's as if that if we're going to, you know, accept reality that, you know, it happened because there were Muslim terrorists who were coming in from Saudi Arabia and God knows where, and they did not like America and American values, that our whole belief system is going to crumble. It's not like that. Your belief and your religion will get stronger if you say that. And then that Holocaust deniers, you know, why aren't you able to accept reality that it was a Muslim ideology that they stole and warped it, and now they're using it to, you know, keep these Palestinians and their future hostage, to just use them for their nefarious end goal. And, you know, the end goal, sadly, is America. If only we were to listen to the other point of view, like a different narrative, then we'd understand.
Dr. Mitchell, your final thoughts?
Well, you know, just to build on what she's saying, I think for Americans, we don't understand the level of brainwashing that has taken place in these fundamentalist Islamic circles, the terrorist groups. So you said that Hezbollah was caught by surprise. They didn't expect. Well, what universe have they been living in that they would not expect that Israel was going to react the way they did? That's because they live in a bubble of their ideology, and every day telling each other how that they're going to win and they're great, and they're completely blinded to the reality of the world around them because of this bubble. And if you know, people often ask, well, will there ever be peace in the Middle East? There's only one way that there will ever be peace, say between Israel and the Palestinians or in the Middle East in general, and that is with the change of the curriculums. The curriculums right now in the Palestinian territories are totally anti-Semitic, and they brainwash these children from infancy up to kill Jews. That has got to change, and it's going to take a generation of education to produce a new generation that has been taught the benefits of living in peace and all that they can achieve if they do live in peace. And that is the real answer to the Middle East. That's the answer to even the problems we have in America with our college campuses. It's about taking control of what's being taught to our young people and teaching them freedom of thought, freedom of religion, and how to analyze and how to make this world a better place, not just destroy it.
You know, Salman Rushdie had a bounty on his head, Mrs. Ali. I don't know many women like yourself who've had a bounty on their head by the Iranian International Republic Guard. What does it do for you in your everyday life, your family, your grandchildren? To me, just seeing here and sensing your spirit, it seems to empower you and encourage you more. You seem to be fearless, but we also know at the end of the day, you're still human. You're a mother, you're a grandmother. While you may have come to peace with maybe the destiny of your life, you certainly would not want that for your loved ones.
I think that's my fight. I came to America to be a free woman and to raise a daughter who could be free. Because I lived in Muslim countries and I know what it's like to live there. I've been beaten for not covering my hair. I've been beaten for having nail polish. My hands have been beaten. I want these people, the young people that are on the campuses, to think about our struggles. They don't want to think about that. But for my granddaughter, you know, I want to leave a better world, a better legacy, that Muslims, we are not like that. Islam is not like that. And the sad thing is that today, you read the polls, you know, that 39% of American Muslims are denying that October 7th ever happened. And then 39% of them want Sharia law. Is that what they want? Women to be beaten? And I want to leave a good legacy. You know, there are Muslims that are quietly coming out and calling me. You'll be surprised, even imams from different parts of America are saying, sister, we are with you. Around the world too, we need to encourage them. You know, media also has a responsibility to encourage the other voices because they're afraid. They know that if they come out, they're either going to lose the funding they're getting for their mosques, or they're going to lose their people, their congregation. And both of those, for that we need better leadership. We need better leadership in the Muslim community. As for my children, I can't even post their pictures anymore. And they have lost friends because, you know, my son was saying, you know, Mom, everybody says like, oh, he's here, his mom's like this. And my daughter said the same thing. So yes, I can't be walking in a city called Irvine in California where my kids live, because somebody might recognize me, especially the organizations that are after me here in America as well. You know, they're all, they've infiltrated our political systems, and they all know who I am because I've been fighting this. But you know, it's a fight between good and evil. And I know that my religion has taught me to be good. And I know my children told me, Mom, we understand. Because, you know, my son-in-law is in the US Marine Corps. And so my daughter said, Mom, I'm a toughie. So I'll know you, even if you die, you died doing what you love. Well, and I said, that's building peace and telling the truth.
Well, you made peace, and you know your purpose in life, and you're serving that purpose. And listen, nothing's going to happen to you until it is your time. Thank you so much, Ms. Anila Ali, and thank you so much, Dr. Susan Michael, so much for what you both do. When we come back, Lora Ries will join us to talk about immigration. I'm Armstrong Williams.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence, there's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
let's stop the politicking, let's stop the games, let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. And welcome back. Lora Ries, former director of Border Security and Immigration Center, is joining us. You know, we are now getting reports from the FBI that they're breaking up terrorist cells that's connected to ISIS, setting up plots to bring about deadly mayhem on Election Day. Is this just the tip of the iceberg?
I fear that it is. And the case that you're talking about was someone from Afghanistan who came to the U.S. in September after we so disastrously evacuated from Kabul. And the Biden-Harris administration quickly put on tens of thousands of Afghans who were not thoroughly vetted onto planes and brought them directly to the U.S. Secretary Mayorkas of Homeland Security claimed multiple times that they were thoroughly vetted, but the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security in multiple reports later reported that no, that was not the case, that they were not adequately vetted, and we are starting to see cases come from that population that should make Americans worried, particularly with regards to potential terrorism.
Lori, what else should we be worried about that goes underreported?
Well, also crime. So if you think about the numbers, CBP, Customs and Border Protection, reported over 10 million encounters of inadmissible aliens during this administration. On top of that, there are at least 2 million known gotaways. Those were aliens who purposely evaded the Border Patrol to sneak into the country. And that is actually an old number now. We've been citing that number for over a year. But because the agents are so overwhelmed and because the administration has taken down aerostats, which were, they look like small blimps that CBP has used in the past to detect gotaways, then the agents simply don't have the time nor the resources right now to estimate gotaways. So that's why I say that 2 million number is low at this point.
Does it surprise you that when Americans are polled, the number one issue involves the open borders that we have, and yet there's so many significant challenges facing immigration policy reform today, and yet that reform doesn't seem to find any way out of the Biden-Harris administration?
It's understandable that this issue is top of mind for Americans because they feel the consequences of open border policies every day, whether that is overcrowded classrooms because hundreds, if not thousands, of migrants are resettled into localities without any advance notice, whether it is overcrowded emergency rooms, whether it is the crime that inevitably comes with this, the lack of housing, the increased taxes to pay for it all. That's why Americans are so concerned about this and for the first time ever are willing to have their new leader, hopefully, do mass deportations to send many of these people home.
You know, we hear this often about how policymakers can balance the economic needs of our nation with the humanitarian concerns with those coming into this country, because we know America is a nation of migrants, and most of them come with good intentions. They have no intentions of wreaking havoc on our society. How do you balance the two?
Well, we need to have a lawful and an orderly and a manageable system each year. And right now we are dealing with, unfortunately, chaos. because the numbers are just overwhelming. So if you have a properly functioning immigration system that is manageable each year, then it is manageable not just for the applicants who come here and want to pursue, whether that's a green card or U.S. citizenship, but manageable for the adjudicators, for the law enforcement agents, for communities to absorb these populations. And so that is what needs to be struck, is a manageable system. And right now, these communities aren't getting notice. They are being overwhelmed. And this is not how a sovereign nation that functions normally should be carrying out its immigration system. So right now, I think we've reached the point where we actually need to pause, because we have over 3 million cases pending in the immigration system, court system. We have another 9 million cases pending before U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And what's never mentioned are all those lawful applicants whose applications are sitting at the bottom of the pile at USCIS, because the agency is dealing with the more recent mass parolees, et cetera, dealing with their work authorization cards, et cetera. And the lawful applicants and the legitimate asylum applicants are just waiting years longer.
You know, I'm going to tell you something that gave me some insight recently. It's when Bill Whitaker of 60 Minutes challenged the vice president on the issue of immigration. And he said, you just discontinued the asylum, and it has stopped thousands of migrants from coming into our country. And then she tried to go back to the Trump policy. He said, but yes, you did this recently. Why didn't you do it in 2021? Why?
Well, the Biden-Harris administration was intent, actually, day one, on rolling back so many Trump policies. Secretary Mayorkas bragged about it, in fact. So anything that had Trump's name on it, this administration repealed it. They intentionally opened the borders. They did it without Congress, so they can fix the problem themselves. Kamala Harris talks about day one, if she becomes president, she's going to do X, Y, or Z, including securing the border. She's in power now. She could do it now. She doesn't, because she does not really believe in securing the border. We are living her values. And recall in her CNN interview that she did with Tim Waltz, she repeatedly said, my values have not changed. And in doing so, she was telling her base, don't pay attention to what I'm saying in this campaign. My values haven't changed. The policies that are in place now align with her values, and they would continue if she is elected to be president.
I'm Armstrong Williams. Lora Ries is our guest, and we'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
You know, we have an election that is upon us, literally less than a week and a few days away. When it comes to the border, you know, we talk much about the vice president and the president and their policies. Talk about Trump's policies when he was president versus where we are now, and talk about his policies in the future.
So when Trump was in office, he tried to get back to congressional intent for many of the statutes that were in the law and tried to get rid of a lot of the fraud. Asylum is a big example, and this is where the Remain in Mexico program came in. Remain in Mexico had been on the books since 1996. Congress passed it, but no prior president had ever used it. And at the time, we were seeing caravans of illegal aliens coming through Central America, Mexico, and to the U.S., and largely had been released into the U.S., claiming asylum, many of those claims fraudulent. And so when he put Remain in Mexico in place, it said, okay, you can apply for asylum here, but you're going to wait in Mexico while your application proceeds. And it was the first time that that tool was used, and it was very effective. And those caravans stopped coming because people knew that no longer could they get to our border, say a few words of fear, knowing it was their ticket to get into the U.S. And so that's just one example of trying to eliminate the fraud and to comply with the law as written on the books, not to use catch and release and just release so many into the U.S., many of whom then don't show up to immigration court and we don't see them again. So it was really trying to get integrity back into the immigration system. Now, not only is Remain in Mexico not being used because the Trump-Harris administration threw it out, but this administration is not detaining illegal aliens as the law calls for. They are not removing most illegal aliens, deportable aliens, criminal aliens. And so we are in this state of chaos, which is why Americans have it as their number one or number two issue. And that's what happens when, one, you're not following the laws on the books, and you aren't interested in securing the border or protecting Americans or upholding your oath that you took when you entered office.
So Trump does have credibility on this issue.
Absolutely.
Talk to everyday Americans. You talked about the classroom and other areas, how it impacts their daily lives as it relates to safety and being vulnerable.
When so many people have been let into the country without being vetted, then it is very easy for criminals to enter the country among the millions. Think about this new criminal gang who we had never heard before from Venezuela, Tren de Aragua. Extremely violent group. And so they have been committing crimes throughout the country. Laken Riley from Georgia was allegedly killed by such a gang member. And this is happening throughout the country. So when you let in volumes of people, then it is very easy for gang members, for criminals, for terrorists to exploit those flows of people and enter themselves and go on to commit heinous crimes.
How can countries ensure border security without compromising the rights of migrants?
Well, first and foremost, it's about our country. We are a sovereign nation, and yet for some reason, the United States is not viewed by the left as permitted to act as a sovereign nation. Congress creates the laws. They decide who, how many, how migrants can come into the U.S., what can they do while they're here, and when are they supposed to leave. And so we are continued to be, even pre-Biden, the most generous country on the planet when it comes to immigration. Year after year after year, we grant about 1 million green cards to lawful permanent residents. And so, again, it's about that balance of having a system that is lawful and orderly and humane year after year. And so the backlogs that we have, millions of cases, that's not orderly. It's not fair to the migrants. It's not fair to Americans who may have petitioned to bring them here for labor reasons or for family reasons. And so we are far afield from how our law is supposed to function, and we need to get back to that.
What are the ethical considerations in the deportation and detention practices?
Well, for detention, immigration detention, it's not, the foundation of it is no different than for criminal detention. That is to protect communities, to prevent flight, but also to ensure removal if an alien is given an order of removal. And so the law requires that aliens who illegally come into the country, or if they have committed serious crimes, that they are supposed to be in immigration detention. And this administration is not following those laws and simply releasing them out onto the street. There was shocking data that came out last week from ICE 425,000 non-detained criminal aliens that is not in ICE detention. And so what that means is they can go on to commit additional crimes, often against other migrants in the communities that they live in, against Americans. It means that many won't appear to immigration court as instructed. And if an immigration judge does in fact issue an order of removal, the chances that they will be removed is extremely low.
You know, I know we're running out of time here, but you know what? I just can't wrap myself around knowing that the Biden administration knows these facts better than you. Mayorkas knows these facts better than you. They know they make Americans vulnerable. We can look at Rachel Morin in Maryland and what happened to her. And yet they continue this policy without any thought in mind of making it better for Americans first. Help us, have you ever thought about why? Is there something that we're missing here?
It's a question I frequently ask, and I don't understand how many of these folks can sleep at night. It seems to be a few different things. Part of it is they believe that they are just helping vulnerable people. That's the line that they will use. Part of it is a globalist perspective where countries shouldn't have borders and migrants should decide for themselves where they go and where they get to resettle, no matter what the numbers are.
Well, maybe we should lock our houses at night.
Right.
That's how crazy that is.
And part of it is pure politics and power. And this manifests itself in a couple
how do you get power when this is killing your chances of becoming president? What power?
Well, we're starting to see this in the election that's coming up. Many of these people are registered to vote. Biden ordered the federal government, all of the agencies, to blitz voter registration with many of these people. You are only supposed to be a U.S. citizen to be able to vote in a federal election, and yet they are going all out to have many of these people register to vote. And they don't even have to vote themselves, but once their name is on a voter roll, that creates a ballot. And then the left can take that ballot and they can mail it in. They can fill ballot boxes that are set up remotely. They can do whatever they want with it. And there's no way to audit it. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is a head count. If you consider the U.S. Census, which does not currently have a U.S. citizenship question on it, Trump tried to get that question back onto the census and the left succeeded in keeping it off. That means everyone is included in the census, including apportionment, which decides how many congressional districts each state gets. And that, if a state like California with large populations...
You've put it all in perspective. I cannot thank you and our guests earlier for joining us. I'm Armstrong Williams.